Some of my stuff is over there. I'm just going to go grab it. All right, if you guys could just grab the Bibles. If you guys have a Bible, flip to 1 Samuel 17. This is where we're going to be spending the majority of our time today. And what we're going to look at is the story of David and Goliath. And in particular, the one thing we are going to be focusing on is just this. The way we look at the world will affect the way we act. Right? So that's what we're going to look at today. Right? The way we look at the world will affect the way we act. The best example that I can come up with that is not found in Scripture is my relationship with my mother. All right, so it's always just been me and my mom as far back as I can remember. So ever since I was about 8 years old, it's been me and my mom, and I think we're pretty close. And as I've grown, but as I've grown, I've sought my own independence a little more, right? I no longer follow her around everywhere. If she goes see a movie, I don't follow her anymore, right? She does her own thing, and I do my own thing. And one of the things that is starting to happen is I'm starting to come home less and less for dinner, and she's starting to get on my case And so sometimes I remember this is a few weeks back. Like I've told this story before to the grade 11, 12 Sunday school class, and so it happened like a couple months ago. But this one day she came up to me and she was just like, "Why? Like, what are you doing? Why aren't you spending time with me? Like, I want you to come here so you can spend time with me. I'll go buy groceries with me, come eat with me." And I'm just like, "Mom, like, don't you understand? I'm really, really busy. I have a lot of things that I have to do. I have to preach. I have to go do schooling. There's a lot of things on my plate. So, Mom, I can't spend that time with you." And she will. She will whine, and she will complain, and she will yell, and she will do many or say many not nice things to me, and I in turn will think many not nice thoughts about her. And so oftentimes after our arguments, I would go back into my room and I would close the door, and I would just sit there, and I would just say, this is the most selfish woman ever. Like can't she see that I'm doing a lot of good, right? I'm busy. It's not like I'm running around, for my own fun, but I'm doing things. I'm doing things for people. I'm doing things for the church. Like, doesn't she get it? Like, doesn't she get it? And I sit there and I just stew in my anger and in my unhappiness, and I'm just like, God, smite her or something, and it gets really bad. It gets really bad. But what God does is God does something really neat. I sit there and I'm thinking, and what God does is God brings me back to this time when I was 8 years old. Actually, I was 9, and I wanted this Power Ranger toy for my birthday, and it cost a lot of money. And so I kind of told my mom about it, and she was just like, "Okay, yeah, we'll see." And I was like, "Okay, whatever," because we really didn't have a lot of money, right? So on my birthday, I get this box, and this is Power Ranger toy, and I'm just like, "Man, that's amazing." And 2 weeks later, I play with it, I'm really happy, and 2 weeks later I throw it out, and because I'm fickle, right? I'm 9, and so and my mom knew that, but my mom bought it for me, right? And it wasn't until years later where I realized just how much that toy cost, and just how little money we had. She was a single mom, raising me and trying to pay off our mortgage, and she had to sacrifice her own happiness, her own well-being, right? She had to work extra hours. She had to do all these things, extra things, in order to pay for that toy that I only played for like 2 weeks. And whenever I think back to that, my heart melts, and I no longer think of her as the most selfish person in the world. I think of her as one of the most selfless people in the world. She cared for me. She raised me on her own. she gave me all of herself. And the last thing that I can possibly say about this woman is that she is selfish. And that changes me, that turns me, right? And what happens in my heart is I want to spend time with her, right? I want to be with her. I want to go eat with her. I want to spend more time at home. And that's what God did for me, right? He adjusted the way I thought and the way I saw her, and therefore it caused me to act differently, right? And so really, going back to the point, the way we look at reality, the way we look at life, will inevitably affect the way we feel, and it'll affect the way we act, right? That's what David and Goliath is about. All right, it's not just the underdog versus the big giant, right? This is about how two different parties look at the world differently. You have David, and you have the Israelites, right? So you see how they see the situation, and then you see how their sight affects the way they act. All right, so that's where we're going to be today. And after we look at that, and so please pay close attention to this, because after we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how the Israelites were able to become like David. All right, and then we'll tie everything back together with the passage that was read just a minute ago. All right, so let's go. 1 Samuel 17, starting from verse 1. It's going to be a lot of reading. We're pretty much going to go through the entire story. So let's do this. 1 Samuel 17. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. They pitched tents at Ephes-Dammim between Socoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. And the Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with a valley between them. And so setting the stage for you guys. Here's a mountain, here's a valley. Here are the Israelites, here are the Philistines, here's the valley. All right? This is going to be fantastic. It's going to be story time. So we're going to go to verse 4 now. All right? And this is what the Israelites see. All right, starting from verse 4. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. The spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And you are not the servants of Saul. Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." Now after reading this, I know what you're thinking, right? What's a shekel, right? And so, well, I'll tell you. That's what I'm here for. A shekel is 11 grams, and so to do the conversion, his armor weighed a little over 125 pounds. All right, so that's like him walking around with me strapped on his shoulders. All right, that's what he's got. Okay, and so this is what the Israelites saw when they were looking at Goliath, right? This huge, strong guy that wore armor that weighed more than they did, and this was the guy that was trying to pick a fight with them, right? And here's the thing. Here's the thing. When the Israelites saw this, all they saw was this is a battle. This is a fight between men. Right? This is a fight between nations. And so they looked at him, and then they looked at themselves, and they were just like, if I fight this guy, he's going to smoke me. Right? And so this is how they saw reality. Right? So let's read on and see how this perception affected the way they acted. Verse 11. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. And so once they heard the challenge, they got scared. I mean, even the sight of this guy would scare. I mean, I would be scared too. This guy's 9 feet tall. That's like me on Pastor Ted's shoulders, swinging this javelin that tip weighs more than a bowling ball. It's just like, not only am I bigger and stronger than you, but I'm going to take this thing that weighs more than your head and I'm going to jab it into you. It's just really intimidating. It's really scary, right? And the Israelites aren't only hearing this once, right? This is coming to them again and again and again for 40 straight days. This guy's just like, send me someone, we'll fight, we'll duke it out. If you win, if you win, fine, we'll completely give you all of us, you can, we'll be your slaves. But if we kill you, you are our slaves. And yeah, good luck, right? That's what Goliath is basically saying. Fight me. If you win, we'll surrender. If I win, you surrender. And the Israelites, they looked at this guy and said, if I fight him, I will lose. But if I don't fight him, that's admitting defeat. And so really, they didn't really know what to do with themselves. And so they were just, the narrator says they were just dismayed and terrified. And that's where they were. And that pretty much sums up the first 11 verses. All right. So we go to verses 12 to 22. And this just introduces David into the story, right? So David wasn't a soldier or anything. If you read it, David was actually delivering cheese. That's what he was doing. He was delivering cheese and bread, right? And so he went to check on his brothers and to make sure that everything was going okay. He was just chatting up his brothers, and all of a sudden he hears Goliath's challenge. And so if we jump down to verse 23, this is where we're going to pick up the story. So 1 Samuel 17, verse 23. And as he was talking with them, he being David, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Skipping down to verse 26. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And so what did David see? All right, David didn't see this mighty warrior, right? What he saw was this Philistine, this uncircumcised Philistine, and this term is just. David wasn't asking for his name. It's like, oh, who is this Philistine? Like, what's his name? Right? No, he wasn't doing that. He was just like, who is this guy that has the audacity to come up against God? Like, are you serious? Is this guy for real? I'll go. Right? Because just think of it this way. Think of an ant coming up to you and being like, we should fight. And if you win, all of us will serve you. But if I win, you will serve me. And at first, this would just be like, oh, ha ha ha, ant, go play, don't bug me, right? It's like at first we just be like, oh, whatever. But if the ant comes again and again for 40 days, and he's just like, I'm going to be, and he just comes, and his overconfidence and his arrogance would begin to offend you, because he actually thinks that he has a shot against you. And all you got to do is just, and it's over, right? But the ant doesn't know that. The ant's just like, come on, bring it, right? That's what's going on. Right? That's what's going on. And that's why David was just so indignant. He was angry. He was offended that this Philistine, that this guy would go up against God and would have the audacity to think that he could win. Right? And so just to wreck the story for you, for those of you who haven't heard this before, David's right. All right? He recognized that Goliath wouldn't just be fighting a man, he'd be fighting God. And again, to contrast this from the Israelites. The Israelites were scared and they ran away from him, and David was just like, bring it. Bring it. Because he knew that it wasn't just man versus man, nation versus nation. This was man versus God. And David knows that if you try to fight God, you'll lose. And so David was just like, fine, bring it. So this is how he saw reality. Let's look at how his perception of reality caused him to act. We go to verse 32. Kind of wrecked the ending for you. So 32 is, and David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he's been fighting. He's been a fighting man from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this Philistine, this uncircumcised Philistine, will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Right? And so, because David saw Goliath properly, he was able to act properly. Right? He recognized that God was on his side, that God would deliver him. Therefore, David went after him. And the narrator, the teller of the story, actually really wants us to pick up on this. The name Goliath isn't mentioned again after the introduction of David into the fight. All right? At that point, from that point in time, he's referred to as the Philistine. Because really, that's what David sees, right? Just this guy. The first few verses, he is Goliath, the 9-foot-tall javelin wielding monster, right? From 24 onwards, he's just some guy. He's just some guy. And that's because Goliath wasn't a giant, right? He was a nobody. Goliath was a nobody. And that was going to get smoked by the living God. It gets awesome. Let's keep reading. Verse 48, we'll pick it up. And the Philistine moved closer to attack him. Verse 41. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you would come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. Skip down to verse 48. And the Philistine moved quickly to attack him. David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into the bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Verse 51, David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from its scabbard. And after he killed him, cut off his head with his own sword. It's a pretty cool story, right? So, at first when I read this, I was just like, there's this 46 verse build up to these 4 verses. Like, I don't really understand why. Until it hit me, right? Until it hit me. See, it wasn't a fight, right? This isn't like one of those epic Hollywood fights where, the good guy starts off well and the bad guy overpowers him, and then, all of a sudden the good guy gets an extra bit of strength and slays and slays the bad guy, right? That's every movie. That's every movie, right? But that's not what happens here. David's just like, I'm going to kill you. Goliath's just like, haha, no, you're not. And David kills him. The end. It's pretty anticlimactic. And the reason why it's like that is because it's not a fight. This isn't a story about a fight. This is a story about God or God crushing an ant. That's what it is, right? Like we don't need, right? We don't need a 5-minute narrative to discuss exactly how we are going to step on the ant, right? It's just bam, done, right? So this wasn't a fight. And secondly, this isn't Hollywood, right? This isn't Hollywood. Right? The point or the climax of the story wasn't in the fight, but it was in the verses preceding, which said that God is for us. God is for us. You need to know that. God is for us. You have nothing on me because God is for us. Right? This is, and this is it, right? It's okay. To summarize, if we think rightly, if we understand that the giants in our lives are really dwarves, are really nothings or nobodies in comparison to God, then we can face our giants. Right? Okay, so typically, that's how the David and Goliath sermon would end. Right? Think properly, then you'll be able to act properly. Right? But that's right. That's right. Right? That's right. But if we stop here, we would be shortchanging ourselves because there's more to the story. So if we go into verse 52, let's keep going. Verses 52. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Shaaraim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. And so after David defeated Goliath, the Israelites were infused with the courage to go up and to fight against the Philistines. Right? They went and they raided the Philistines and plundered their camps. That's what it says, right? And so here's the question. What changed? Right? In verse 11, they were shaking in their boots, and in verse 52, they're running with full head of steam. Right? What changed? I mean, it's obvious that their perception of reality changed, right? But really, how? How did that happen? If you guys would go back to verses 46 and 47. And this is David talking. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. And today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. David's actions revealed reality to the Israelites. All right? See, the Israelites received revelation, or to put it simply, they had truth given to them. They had truth shown to them. Right? See, David knew that God would use his actions, his act of slaying Goliath, right, to get the Israelites to realize that there is a God in Israel, that he is on their side, and that he will deliver them. Right? See, David didn't just destroy Goliath. Right? He destroyed the doubts that were going on in the Israelites' heads over whether God would or could deliver them. David destroyed the shackles of fear and of trembling and of dismay. Right? And it infused the Israelites with the courage to run into battle. And so here's the point. Here's the point. David's actions caused Israel's eyes to be open to the reality that God is for them and that he would deliver them. Right? That's what changed. See, the Israelites weren't just like, oh, be like David, be like David, be like David, be like David, be like David. See, it didn't happen like that, right? They didn't psych themselves up. They didn't go through this whole, self-talk ritual. What they did was they saw David act, and they were just, man, God is real. Like it's nothing. I can't do anything about it. He's real. Let's go fight, right? That's what happened. That's what happened. And here's the distinction that I want to make, right? The Israelites didn't become like David, because the goal, and we will get there, is the goal is for us to be like David, right? To be like David, to see properly, so that we can act properly, right? But the Israelites didn't do that by trying to be like David, but by watching David, by looking at David, and by witnessing David's victory. Why? Because David's actions opened their eyes to the way the world actually was. Right? David's actions revealed the way the world actually is. He didn't play a trick. He said, this is what the world is like. God is for you and not against you, and I will show you. And after he does, the Israelites are just like, he's real. Let's go. That's it. Right? That's it. And so now here's the fun question. And I get to pose this to you guys. How is the story of David and Goliath good news to us? And how is it relevant to us? Okay. Well, we'll do this first. David fought Goliath, and his victory allowed the Israelites to be victorious. In the same way, ultimately, David points to Jesus, points to a Savior who will come and ultimately defeat Satan, sin, and death. All right? So David points to Jesus. That's why this is good news for us. We'll go over the examples. David fought Goliath when no one else could. David fought Goliath when no one else could. Jesus fought the fight that we could not fight, right? For our soul. We already lost it. Jesus won it back for us. I'll go over what that means in a bit. Second, David decisively won the battle by defeating Goliath. Jesus won the battle decisively for your souls, for my soul, by dying on the cross and raising on the third day, thus conquering Satan, sin, and death. Number 3, David's victory is imputed towards Israel, meaning that because David won, Israel won. Right? And Jesus' victory over Satan, sin, and death is imputed onto us, meaning that because Jesus conquered Satan, sin, and death, we are conquerors. Right? And here's the thing, all right? If David points to Jesus and Goliath points to Satan, sin, and death, we're Israel. We're Israel, by the way, and we're unable. We're unable to fight Goliath. We're unable to fight Satan, sin, and death. We're unable to. Jesus fought for us and won for us. Let's go back to our story, or let's go back to our idea. Right? If we see rightly, then we'll act rightly. Okay, and then pull it all together. What is our vision like? What do we see? And I have 5 minutes to do this, and I have 15 minutes worth of material. So this is God's grace on you. What we're doing, okay. Ephesians 4, 17 to 18. Let's do this. So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. And what Paul's talking about, he's not saying that we're darkened and we can't do math or physics, right? What he's saying is we're darkened and we don't have the ability to see God rightly, right? We don't have the ability to perceive reality where Jesus Christ is the God of the universe. He is the Son of God who loves you and desires the best for you. That's what he's saying. And Paul was writing this letter to Christians, which means that he's not only talking about non-Christians, but this darkened understanding is pervasive. It's still existent in those of us who accept Jesus. There are still areas in our lives that are darkened, right? There's still areas in our life where we don't fully see that God is who he says he is and that he has done what he says he has done. All right? And this is how this plays out. This is how this plays out. Because that's what we see. So this is how this plays out. We don't think that Jesus is enough for our joy. I got to keep talking before I get in trouble. Jesus is not enough. This darkened understanding, this warped perception of reality that is in us says that Jesus is not enough for our joy. And see, no one will come out and say that. I won't come out and say Jesus is not enough for my joy, but my actions will definitely betray what I actually think and feel. I'll give you an example. I struggle mightily with people pleasing. I love people liking me. I love it. And so I will do anything to get you guys to love me. Sounds so bad. It's like Paul will be all things to all people for the gospel. I will be all things to all people for my own gain. It's bad, right? I will lie if I need to lie. I will cut people down if I need to cut people down, right? I will swear, or I will say inappropriate things or do inappropriate things just so you will like me, right? And whenever I try to please people at the expense of trying to please God, right? Lying, wrong. Commandment number 8, 9, 10. Whenever I try to please people over pleasing God, I'm basically saying, hey God, I'm better off following my own rules, right? I'm better off, seeking out my own joy because you really don't know what's best for me. I know what's best for me. Right? If we were to lowest common denominator what sin is, it's this: we don't believe that God is actually who he says he is, that he is out for our joy, that he is out for our best. Right? Every sin. I mean, we can start listing them off. See, when we're watching television all day, or when we're playing video games for hours on end, or YouTubing your spare time away, or spending all your time with your friends and zero time with God, what you're actually saying is, God, I'm better off following my own rules. You are not. You don't know what's best for me. I do. Right? So I'm going to do what I need to do, and that's it. And please don't take this to mean that I think television is evil. But what I'm actually saying is, if we pour ourselves into these things, if I pour myself into people-pleasing, and I find joy in that, because let's face it, sin is fun. Sin is fun, or else we wouldn't do it. If I pour myself into people-pleasing, or television watching, or YouTubing, or fill in the blank, there's this subtle twist that goes on in our hearts, and it goes like this. People are better than Jesus, right? What happens in our heart is, because I find pleasure in people, people pleasing is better than God pleasing. Watching TV is better than Jesus. That's what goes on, right? See, sin is fun, it's pleasurable, but it will inevitably blind you from reality. Because God and God alone, and Jesus alone, is out for our good. Yeah. And so, having said all of this, how do we conquer this? And I know I haven't done this justice. But for those of us today that are struggling with sin, right? Mine's people-pleasing. Some of you, it might be materialism. For some of you, it might be, I'm wasting my time in front of the television, or I can't put my Xbox controller down. Or for some of you, and to get more serious, for some of you, it's just constant lust. Or for some of you, it's anger, right? For some of you, it's chronic lying. And we can try to behavior modify ourselves and say, I'm going to stop lying and cheating and saying things. But if I don't go to the root of the matter, if I don't attack the fact that I think that God is not as good as people, if I don't attack that root, then eventually, I'm just going to start lying again. I'm just going to start saying things again. Because really, if you don't fix the heart, right? We sing from the inside out, Lord, my soul cries out. Like that, if you don't fix the heart, then no amount of behavioral modification will change you, will help you conquer. And I have 1 minute. Let's do Romans 8:28-34. And I will read this. And so, this, by the way, is the cure. All right, we talk about how, right? How are we supposed to slay our giants? How are we supposed to slay our sin? I'm struggling with sin. I am in sin. How do I stop being that self-righteous, arrogant, angry person that lusts after anything that walks? How do I stop? Romans 8:28-34. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, that he might be the firstborn amongst many brothers. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Here's where it gets good. What then shall we say in response to this? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? It is God who justifies. Who is he that condemns? Christ Jesus, who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is also interceding for us. We fix our eyes on Jesus. That's the cure. And it sounds really cheesy, but give me a minute. What happens is, what I'm saying is, I'm begging you, exhorting you, calling you to look to Jesus, to see him broken, dying on the cross for you. Why? Because this changes us. This messes with our hearts. It melts our hearts. If we keep our eyes there, if we look to Jesus, if we spend time with him, and as you let the reality of his love sink into your hearts, his love will melt your heart and you will turn back to him. Quick example. A father came up to me and said, how do I get my son to love me? And I'm just like, you love him. You show him you love him. You do whatever you can to show him you love him. You find out what his love languages are, and you love him that way. Right? If he wants hugs, you hug him. If he wants words of affirmation, you give him words of affirmation. And here's why. When you do that, when you pursue your son's heart will eventually melt and he will come back to you. That's how we're wired. Right? Because Jesus' actions has opened our eyes and allowed us to see reality as it is. Therefore, in all these things, whatever your thing is, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, nor the present nor the future, nor any power, nor any height nor depth, nor anything in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Jesus conquered Satan, sin, and death. And by acting in a way that demonstrates the reality of his love for us, once and for all proving his love for us, right? And so the only way we can conquer the sin in our lives and the sins of our community, right, is for us to look to Jesus, to point people to Jesus. You want to care for your community, point people to Jesus, right? Because he is the one who demonstrates that there is a true God, that he is all for you, not against you. And he showed us this by dying for us on the cross. And only this vision, only this reality, only this will be able to turn our hearts away from sin and towards him who loves us most. Jesus, let's pray. God, we thank you for we thank you for your word and for the beautiful gospel that we have been given. We thank you for the fact that, Jesus, you have opened our eyes to what truth really is. Jesus, that you love us and that you desire us. And God, I pray that as we reflect and as we meditate on this reality, that God, you would turn and change our hearts. And God, that we would be able to say with Paul that you are our only gain. When we compare you, Jesus, to anything in the world, that it is you, Jesus, who is better. And God, please grant us that vision of you. Give us that insight on who you are, that we would be able to live lives that honor you and please you. And so we ask for these things, Jesus, in your beautiful name. Amen.